Hi, Mystery Recapped here. Today, I'm going to explain a horror adventure movie called Minotaur. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The movie begins with a narration about how, in ancient times, a kingdom was ruled by a dark empire whose people worshipped the bull as a god. However, as the kingdom expanded, so did its ruler's desire for luxury and power. As a result, some officials devised a horrific plan. The queen should mate with a bull to create the perfect being. Maybe if by perfect being, you mean a dead queen. The queen, driven by ambition, agreed to the plan and eventually became pregnant. The creature grew inside of her for 13 months. Before her belly was cut open, she lost her life in the process, but gave birth to a monstrous hybrid of man and bull called the Minotaur. The population then began to worship the Minotaur as their god, which strengthened their empire even further. However, as the beast matured, so did his insatiable appetite for flesh and blood. As a result, he was kept locked in a labyrinth to avoid causing any trouble. The kingdom then invented a story about the queen's firstborn son being killed by local villagers. They also devised a punishment in which 8 young people from the village are sacrificed to the Minotaur once every 3 years. Following this, the scene cuts to the village, where the locals are terrified because the sacrifice time has arrived. We then see our protagonist, Theo, who is the son of the village chief. As he and his best friend, Danu, guide their sheep, they notice a leprous seer, whose arrival means ill news. Later, Theo meets with his father and discusses what he saw earlier. He is also upset that his lover, Fion, was taken in the last sacrifice. He admits that he still misses her, but his father urges him to move on. The next morning, Theo notices some wolves approaching his sheep to attack them. He rushes to their rescue, but one of them ends up getting killed. Theo then chases the wolves and soon arrives at a mysterious cave where he finds the leprous seer waiting for him. The seer is wearing a broken amulet, which shocks Theo because it belonged to his lover, Fion. It turns out that when they were taking her away, she dropped the amulet, which broke into 2 pieces, one meant for her and the other for Theo. The seer then reveals that Fion is still alive and has been kidnapped inside the castle. Theo thinks she's bluffing, but she insists she's speaking the truth. She also reveals that in order to save Fion, he must first kill the beast. Upon returning home, Theo speaks with his father and informs him about what the seer said. However, Dad dismisses it as lies and accuses the seer of manipulating Theo. He says that the Minotaur is a god and cannot be killed by an ordinary human. He advises Theo to focus on saving himself so that he can become the next village leader and have children. However, Theo responds that the person who is supposed to bear his children is gone. In the evening, some royal soldiers arrive to apprehend the young people for the sacrifice. They begin to wreak havoc and violently drag away many villagers. Meanwhile, Theo watches the scene from afar and is unable to forget what the seer told him. He imagines his beloved Fion waiting for him to save her. So he rushes up to one of the captured women, frees her, and then takes her place. In the next scene, we see the captives locked in an iron cage, and the group includes Danu, Morna, Didi, Vina, Zico, Tyro, and Non. They are all shocked to see Theo among them, as he is the village leader's son and is not supposed to be here. When asked about his intentions, Theo reveals that he plans to kill the Minotaur. But just like his dad, his friends also argue that the Minotaur is a god and a normal human isn't capable of killing him. Shortly after, the group is brought to the Great Castle, where they are taken before King Deucalion and his sister Raphaela. We see that in the middle of the hall there is a deep labyrinth covered by large, thick iron bars. This is where the beast, the Minotaur, resides. Meanwhile, Deucalion thoroughly inspects the captives and picks Morna and Vina for the sacrifice. He shamelessly reasons that virgins are his favorites. Next, Raphaela approaches the girls and makes them inhale a gassed bull skull. This seems to hypnotize them, and Raphaela causes more damage by kissing them seductively. Deucalion states that their aroused flesh will taste better, and their god will be pleased. He then summons the Minotaur, who finally makes his appearance in the pit, causing the entire castle to shake. The girls are still hypnotized by the gas and are ready to jump into the pit. However, Theo reacts quickly and stops them from doing so. He then begins fighting the soldiers, and Tyro also joins him, but in the end, the soldiers easily overpower and restrain them. This makes Deucalion very angry, so he orders the entire group to be thrown into a room. He then declares swears that he will sacrifice all of them at once. Afterward, the captives talk about why the Minotaur is imprisoned underground if he's a god. Tyro argues that it's because he's the god of the dark world, but Theo disagrees, stating that it's just a beast and nothing more. Meanwhile, Rafaela asks her maid to bring Theo to her chambers. It turns out the seer has already informed her of his impending arrival. Next, Theo is taken to Rafaela's chamber, where she places him on the bed and begins to seduce him. She even calls him by his real name, which shocks Theo since he hasn't disclosed it to anyone here. She tries to make love to him, but Theo rejects her and asks what she wants. Rafaela then begs him for his help to escape from the clutches of the beast. She also reveals that Theon is still alive and has been waiting for him. Before Theo can respond, Deucalion bursts into the chamber and scolds his sister for seducing such a lowlife. Theo tries to flee, but he is quickly knocked unconscious by the soldiers. Deucalion then hits his sister and threatens her, saying she will be fed to the Minotaur if she defies him again. He tells her that if she's so desperate, he will make all the soldiers and guards of the castle sleep with her. In the next scene, the captives are thrown into the labyrinth one by one through different entrances. Theo hears his friends screaming from nearby, but he can't locate them. Soon after, a loud roar is heard from a distance, and the captives quickly try to hide. This is when the beast makes his grand appearance. He quickly attacks Nan and kills her, horrifying the rest of the group. Meanwhile, Deucalion approaches Rafaela to apologize for his previous behavior. He then attempts to seduce her himself, saying she should bear his children. Rafaela is disgusted by his advances, but she has no choice but to comply with his orders. She is then taken to his chambers to sleep with him, but moments later, she runs away and stands in front of the pit. Rafaela states that she would rather sleep with slaves and lepers than bear his child. Deucalion tries to stop her and begs her not to do it, but Rafaela jumps into the labyrinth. Back in the pit, we see rats feeding on the remains of dead bodies. It turns out the labyrinth produces some kind of gas, which Deucalion had used on the girls earlier. Theo walks cautiously and soon hears what seems to be Theon's voice calling for help. However, it turns out to be a hallucination, and Theon is nowhere to be found. Theo instead encounters Morna, who tries to say something, but since she is mute, he doesn't understand her. Suddenly, they hear the screams of their companions and head towards the sound. They end up reuniting with Danu and Vina, who are searching for a way out. The group then moves forward and soon stumbles upon the remains of Nan, which freaks them out. They begin to scream like kids, but Tyro arrives with Zico and tells them to be quiet. Tyro reveals that he can hear the Minotaur approaching and decides to kill the beast himself. However, he needs someone to act as bait to lure him. Elsewhere, Deucalion is seen crying in front of the pit, pleading with the Minotaur to not harm his sister. He offers the beast many virgins and even newborn babies, but begs that Rafaela be released. Meanwhile, in the labyrinth, Theo serves as bait while the others hide and prepare to attack the Minotaur. To their surprise, they instead come across Rafaela, who is relieved to see Theo alive. She tries to convince the group that she is on their side, but no one trusts her. Rafaela claims that she knows a secret way out and that her maid will open the door for them, although the rest of the group is skeptical and suspects it might be a trap. Theo decides to believe her. "Yonder nymph hath gazed upon mine peen. Thy can trust her." However, Vina calls Rafaela a witch and accuses her of enchanting Theo as well. She refuses to follow her and heads in the opposite direction instead. Rafaela asks Theo to stop her, but before he can act, the Minotaur suddenly appears behind Vina. He impales her with his sharp horns, killing her instantly. The sight horrifies the others, and they have no choice but to follow Rafaela for now. As the group moves forward, they soon come across Didi in an unconscious state, but Rafaela feeds her something, causing her to miraculously wake up. On the other side, Rafaela's maid is preparing to open the exit door, but she's eventually discovered by Deucalion. He accuses her of treason and executes her on the spot. Shortly after, the captives reach the exit door, and Rafaela calls out to her maid to open it. However, the door remains shut, and no one responds from the other side. This puts everyone in a desperate situation, and the group begins accusing Rafaela of tricking them. They start banging on the door, but it only ends up attracting the Minotaur's attention. He arrives there in no time and brutally impales Zico. Seeing this, the others panic and scatter throughout the labyrinth. Theo, Danu, and Morna run in one direction, while Didi and Tyro head in the other, leaving Rafaela alone. A while later, Theo, Danu, and Morna Morna come across a man named Turag, who appears to have been living in the labyrinth for a long time. He reveals that he has survived all this time by eating rats and insects. The man seems to have lost his mind, but still has valuable information about the place. He leads the group to a small opening between the rocks, where he hides from the beast. He also shows them a map he has made of the labyrinth. This makes Theo feel hopeful again, and he asks about Theon. When Turag hesitates to answer, he becomes so angry that he begins shouting at him. Unfortunately, this summons the Minotaur, who soon arrives while knocking down several rocks.
Theon is my main hoe.
On the other hand, a desperate Deucalion orders the guards to open the door to the labyrinth. He calls out for Raphaela, but only draws the attention of the Minotaur, who then moves towards him. Deucalion quickly sacrifices the guard to the beast before slipping through the door and locking it behind him. He cries about not getting his sister back, while the Minotaur murders the guard inside. Elsewhere, Turag finally points out Theon's location on the map, which makes Theo very happy. Next, we see Didi and Tyro attempting to climb up a wall to escape. Tyro manages to reach the top, grabs onto one of the iron bars, and urges Didi to come up as well. He even extends his hand and encourages her to hurry. However, Didi is terrified when she hears the beast approaching close. Tyro begs her not to look down, but she does exactly that and begins screaming in fear. She eventually falls into the pit, where the beast devours her in seconds. In another scene, Theo finally arrives at Theon's location and finds her. He is overjoyed to see her after such a long time, and Theon reveals that she has been waiting for him. But as they embrace, she suddenly turns into a corpse, and Theo realizes he was only hallucinating. He bursts into tears, finally realizing that Theon is truly gone and he will never see her again. Not far away, Danu begins searching for Theo and calls out to him. Unfortunately, he is soon found by the Minotaur and eliminated. His screams echo throughout the labyrinth, and Theo is distraught that he couldn't save his best friend. In his anger, he throws his amulet against the labyrinth walls. This generates a spark that ignites a small fire, leaving him in shock. Moments later, Theo is approached by Raphaela, who is surprisingly still alive. The two then engage in a tense conversation, and she finally reveals the truth about the Minotaur. Raphaela admits that it was the beast who killed the oldest prince, but to avoid embarrassment, the royal family blamed the villagers. They also created the fake punishment of bringing 8 villagers as sacrifices. Furthermore, Theon has long been dead, and the seer lied to Theo to lure him here to kill the beast. She then tells him that he's their only hope and urges him to eliminate the Minotaur once and for all. After this, Raphaela leads Theo deep into the labyrinth, from which they extract the hallucination-inducing gas. Theo has figured out by this point that the gas is highly sensitive to fire. While the two are talking, the Minotaur suddenly arrives at the scene. Before he can launch an attack, Tyro also shows up and confronts the beast. Taking advantage of this distraction, Theo takes Raphaela to a nearby stream and asks her to stay in the water. But when he returns to the fight, he is horrified to see that Tyro has been impaled brutally. With no other options, Theo decides to confront the beast head-on. He provokes the Minotaur and urges him to attack him. The latter takes the bait and charges towards him in rage, but Theo dodges the blow at the last second. This causes the Minotaur to crash into the wall, causing significant injuries and even breaking one of his horns. With the beast now vulnerable, Theo uses his amulet to generate another spark on the walls. This causes a massive explosion, which spreads fire throughout the labyrinth and into the castle halls. Fortunately, Theo and Raphaela manage to survive by hiding in a swamp, but they are horrified to discover that the Minotaur is still not dead. He attacks Theo once more, but the latter thrusts one of his broken horns into his mouth. The injured beast then crashes into a rock, which drives the horn through his head and eventually kills him. After the villain is finally dead, Theo and Raphaela depart from there. They soon come across Turag and Morna, who have taken refuge from the fire at the edge of the labyrinth. The group then arrives outside to find the castle in ruins, and Deucalion fatally wounded on the floor. He is relieved to see his sister alive and asks her to help him. However, Raphaela responds by kissing him goodbye and suffocates him to death. Now that the Minotaur and King Deucalion are eliminated, the Dark Empire crumbles, and Theo becomes a legend for slaying the monster. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.